Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. So glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. An old Emerson, Lake and Palmer reference that you probably didn't get, but who knows? Maybe somebody out there will look it up. I'm going to keep it short and sweet today because there's not a whole lot to say apart from what is in the email that I sent out. I'm sending out student paper number 1. I think it's a very good and very organized paper with a lot of very aggressive evidence that it provides for why the paper is built around reality, fantasy, and dream. Why the paper is built around, reality, fantasy, and dream. And the person was, pretty exuberant is the word I guess I'll use about this paper. It was about 1,900 words. The word limit that, of course, is required is 1,000. So it's almost double what was required. And it's done very thoroughly, and it's organized in a very particular fashion. And that's what I'm looking for primarily here, is can you organize this book in a way that makes sense according to the timeline? And that's not an easy thing to do because the book is very, very tricky about where it might break down into any number of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sections with respect to reality, fantasy, dream, drug-induced state, altered state of consciousness, near-death experience, whatever you might see in this particular book. I've had all kinds of interpretations of it over, a number of years. In any case, that's what I want to try to talk about here today, is to take a look at this particular paper. If you remember last time, we had this particular timeline as one that was a possible one. Well, in this particular paper, the author sees not the sister-in-law's visit as a period of time where the book goes into fantasy, but the time when Jean-Marc starts writing the letters. That's where it breaks into fantasy. And you could probably argue that this line then should be a little bit further up, maybe somewhere around here. And then the paper has it where it breaks into the dream, not when the train goes into the tunnel, okay, like I was talking about in the example last time, but the discussion here is when Chantal realizes that Jean-Marc is writing the letters, okay? So those are our breakpoints: reality to Chantal's fantasy to Chantal's dream. And then our body paper is organized accordingly: reality, fantasy, and dream. What this paper does very nicely that many others do not, and is somewhat harder to do, and it's why I was discussing this last time, is that oftentimes in the reality section you can set up certain aspects of the character's personality. In the case of this paper, this person's going to look at the insecurity she has about her looks and her hypersensitivity to invasions of privacy, or her need for privacy. And look at how those two things change from the reality section to the fantasy section, and then finally to the dream section. So those are, ways that you can find to bring a rationale for each one of the sections in your body paragraphs for your paper. Because remember, that is what you're really trying to do in your body. Don't just summarize the action that goes on there. You're using the action in that particular section of the book to illustrate whether it's reality, fantasy, dream, or drug-induced state, or whatever you have. Okay, you're really going to illustrate something about the setting for that particular section of the book. So it's a kind of strange paper in that regard. You're not illustrating something about character or about plot or theme. you're really characterizing or illustrating some aspect of the setting, reality, fantasy, dream, etc. Okay? And then finally, in the conclusion, discusses the nature or the aspect of an aspect of all three of those and how they kind of intertwine, and in the end, forge something like identity, which is, to my reading, kind of what Kundera is saying. Subconscious informs our fantasy life, and our fantasy life, with the way we project onto each other and then live through our projections, then becomes our real self in our lives. So it bubbles up from the subconscious through our imagination to take root in who we are. And if we had done this class, live, I'd have a lot more to say about that, but I want to keep these videos relatively short and sweet. So that's primarily what this particular paper is about, how it's structured. I'm not going to go into any details necessarily about what takes place in each paragraph. I'll let you go and read those yourselves, and then read my commentary on the bottom of the email. The author does a very nice job of tracing the in the beginning, in the fantasy section, the need for privacy and the insecurity about looks is definitely discussed, how that changes in the fantasy section. And then in the dream section, there's four different criteria that the author uses to describe why that last section of the book is dream. And they vary from the idea of the expressed to subconscious desires for privacy and for to be desirable, to a kind of time-space distortion that we often see with dreams, to an overwhelming amount of coincidence that occurs within dreams, and there's one other criteria that was part of the dream section I can't recall right now. But it's in my write-up. You can go take a look at that. The author hits each one of those four, okay, and does a very thorough job of showing each one of them. The other thing the paper does that's nice is that it exhibits very strong transitional language. So we have topic statements that clearly orient the reader at every step of the way. So you shouldn't get lost as a reader as to what the author's aims are here. So it's a good example. Take a look at it. Very thoroughly researched and organized. I hope it serves as a good model for you moving forward. We'll see you on Thursday.